Hello YouTube, how you going? My name's Warbles on a lot. Some of you may have seen my stuff before, others are perhaps here because of the title, Julian Assange and the 5 F's philosophy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm 51, I'm a hermit. Every society needs a fool on the hill, and where I come from, it seems to be my job. I live 1,113 metres above mean sea level, and that means that I am vertically superior to all of my neighbours within 15 to 70 or 80 kilometres in 360 degrees. I look down upon all of them. Therefore, I don't have to fix my aeroplane. Why else do you want an aeroplane if not to look down upon your neighbours? So being the fool on the hill, I get to pontificate from time to time, and this is one of those times. Now, as I sit here, I've just finished watching a movie by Skid Row Radio. Hi Skiddy, how you going? And I went to put a comment on your thread, Skiddy, and I found that I'd been dumped into a pending tank, which surprised me greatly and provided me with a motivation to make a movie about Julian Assange and his 5 F's philosophy and the difference between Wikileaks and Dickileaks. Alright? Now, I'm 51 and Julian Assange, I may be wrong, I think he's 47. He's a bit younger than me. He grew up on the Gold Coast in Queensland, in Australia. And I know what the Gold Coast teenage male's philosophy was at the time because it was being pumped out through all the media and subliminal channels into the society that I grew up in. Julian's father died when he was 13, and he appears to have suffered a personality developmental arrest at 13. So what you've got to consider when attempting to understand the phenomenon of Julian Assange is that he is driven by the 13-year-old Queensland Gold Coast male view of life. He's determined to prove himself to be the triumphant underdog. So he's buried himself in his basement and he's learned computerese, and he's absolutely crackerjack shit hot at running computers. So he's set up his Dickileaks, his Wikileaks, Freudian slip there, he set up his Wikileaks company to demonstrate how clever he is by using computers to kick the powers that be up the arse and show them as buffoons. Well, okay, good on him. That's what he's doing. He's having fun doing it. And he was doing it pretty well. And he was embarrassing the Yankees of Norte, AmeriKano, possibly more than he was embarrassing anybody else on earth. But he wasn't actually putting out any genuine security type risky information. He was just showing that they're a bunch of pompous wankers. He, because of his personality arrest, every time he had a win in his business corporate empire, in his personal life, he tends to apparently like to celebrate the victory. And he celebrates his victory by going and seducing a stranger. Now this is where we get into his Queensland Gold Coast teenage philosophy that froze when he was 13. Right? Young men in Australia, boys hitting puberty, back then, we were soaked in the philosophy of the 5 F's. Now, if you've got sensitive ears or you can't cope with rude words, you know, go somewhere else now, because the 5 F's were find 'em, follow 'em, finger 'em, fuck 'em and forget 'em. Okay? And Julian Assange has taken that to almost an art form in his 40s. To the point where there are stories that he has 13 or 17 illegitimate children scattered around the world, and people who know him and have fallen out of favour with him have been interviewed on ABC Radio National. I've listened to all the interviews. He counts it a feather in his cap to be able to inseminate a strange woman. He likes doing it. Okay, so that's in Australia. And back in those days, there was 1 hour of sex education in primary school and there was 1 hour of sex education in high school. So he probably had 2 hours of formal education on human reproduction. And he's 47 and I'm 51. So I was in kindergarten in Australia in 1965, 66. And Julian Assange went to Sweden because he was running away from the Americans, because he knew the Americans would do whatever they could to get a hold of him, and Sweden, he thought, had all sorts of liberal laws on freedom of information and stuff, and maybe it does. But he didn't pay attention and he didn't do his research, and he didn't notice that the Swedes took their kindergarten class of 1965 and they gave them 1 hour of formal lectures on human reproduction per week. So when the class of 1965 come out the end of high school in Sweden, they'd had 500 hours of formal reproduction. And you can't just fixate on the plumbing for 500 hours. You've got to go into the emotional and intellectual and psychological effects of human reproduction. So it's not just sex. It's obstetrics and gynecology and urology and maternal and infant care and baby and infant care and how to fix nappies, financial counselling, relationship counselling. You know, there's a lot in human reproduction, according to the Swedes. And Stockholm University and Edinburgh University studied the life outcomes of the class of 65 as they grew older and older and older, and in 1995 they decided that they'd draw a line under it, and they wrote the research paper, and I read it in New Scientist in 1997. And the findings were that the Swedish group, who had 500 hours of lectures in human reproduction, they had a lower rate of being sexually abused as children because they wouldn't stand still for it. I think they knew what was happening and they disclosed. They had a higher age at first sexual encounter. They also had a lower rate of being physically abused as kids. They had a higher age at first sexual encounter, a lower number of physical partners before settling into a permanent relationship, a lower rate of unwanted or unplanned pregnancies, a lower rate of abortion, a lower rate of babies up for adoption, a lower rate of sexually transmitted diseases, a lower rate of relationship breakdown, a lower rate of unemployment, a lower rate of being arrested by the police, a lower rate of being convicted and imprisoned, a lower rate of being diagnosed with psychiatric illness, a lower rate of cancer and heart disease, and a lower rate of bankruptcy. By every measurable standard, the children who had 500 hours of formal lectures on human reproduction did better than the children who had 1 hour in Edinburgh, right? Them's the figures, as at 1997. So that cohort, as they grew older, when they got to their mid-30s, they elected a bunch of politicians who got the point. So they formulated laws which mean, for example, that in Sweden, if you have been paid to perform the sex act, you are declared to be psychologically damaged, you are given a pension for life and offered free counselling. So you got no excuse for doing it again, but it's not against the law for you to do it again because you're considered to be damaged. However, it's against the law to pay anybody to have sex in Sweden. So if some damaged individual hangs out her shingle or his shingle and advertises an escort agency or a call agency or sex for pay in a motel, the cops come and take up the rooms on either side of it with listening devices, and they arrest the people who go in and pay for sex. That's the culture that Julian Assange took his 5F's philosophy with his 13-year-old mindset, and 2 women that he had sex with in celebration of his Wikileaks document dump got together afterwards and compared notes, and one of them was cranky because she agreed to have sex with a condom while Julian agreed to have sex with the other side of the condom. And they agreed to pretend they were having sex with each other while actually each one was having sex with a condom. But you can use your thumbnail to split a condom under the guise of stimulation. And lady number 1 discovered that Julian had turned his condom into a cock ring and he'd inseminated her without her consent. And in Sweden, that's rape. Lady number 2 found that she'd consented to have sex with a condom while Julian had consented to have sex with the other side of the condom while she was awake. Yeah. And she woke up in the middle of the night after having had the consensual sex with the condom in between, to find that Julian was humping away while she had been asleep and he didn't use a condom. So these two women compared their notes and they talked to their Swedish prosecutor and they decided they wanted to talk to Julian about rape. Okay? 2 counts, 2 different women. 2 different cultures. 5F's philosophy from the Gold Coast does not fly well in Sweden. And that's the facts. You know, the Swedes are entitled to pursue him how and where and why they feel the need to. The fact that they may be currying favour with the big American ally is beside the point. The fact that Julian went and kicked the big American ally in the balls as hard as he could for as long as he could on every occasion he could think up a method of doing it, that's actually beside the point. The fact is, he's gone to Sweden and by their terms, he's caused 2 women to complain that they have been raped by him. And he's done this at a point when he was hiding out in Sweden because vast numbers of countries were already cooperating with the Americans' desire to jump on his balls. He knew he had no leeway. He's taken off his armour and he said, hit me here, hit me here, hit me here. And the Yanks are going to do it. All right, and the Australian government is not going to bloody stop the Americans. They did jack shit with David Hicks. As far as the Australian government is concerned, it is all the way with USA, just like it has been since Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president, and it was all the way with LBJ. And if David Hicks or Julian Assange wants to run around the world and kick America in the balls, Australia will do fucking nothing to help him. I mean, we've got a Welsh rarebit bitch as a Prime Minister. Have you seen our Prime Minister? It's a fucking joke, man. Don't expect Australia to help Julian Assange. But I don't see why he should expect anybody to help him. He's put himself in a mess, all of his own making, because he never wanted to grow up in terms of his emotional sexuality. He uses women like Kleenex. He picks them up, he blows in them, he crumples them, and he discards them. And he's picking up his karma now. You know, if he'd kept a button on his fly, the Yankees could never have touched him. He's in the shit he is because he wanted to fuck around. That's his problem. He's a low hound. Has to sniff around any cunt he thinks is in heat. And as for the idea that the British might restrain themselves on the topic of whether or not they're going to break into the Ecuadorian embassy, gee. The British have assumed the role of the lapdog ever since World War I when it comes to American foreign policy. The British will do whatever the Americans ask them to do, and they are sort of personally, politically, constitutionally unimpressed at the idea that a bumptious upstart from the colonies should come and lose in every British jurisdiction that he tried to play having a court case in, and then break his bail and go and seek diplomatic immunity from the Ecuadorian embassy. I mean, it's just not playing the game, old boy. And that's about the attitude they're going to take. He hasn't played the game, so they're not going to play the game. Do you think it's going to upset the British economy if Ecuador closes a couple of trade treaties or withdraws its ambassador? Not one friggin' bit. You know, Julian's put his own balls in a vice, and he's wondering why the people that he annoyed are turning the screw. It's ridiculous for anybody to think that he's got a chance of escaping to Ecuador now that the British government are threatening to kick the door in. He should have been smuggled out of that place in a laundry basket or in a garbage bin full of table scraps weeks ago. He's got no hope. And I don't think that asking your subscribers to go and get their heads caved in by the London Riot-Police is going to affect the outcome at all, Skiddy. It's a stupid bloody idea. Julian did it to himself. Let him undo it. But then again, as my Trouble and Strife said, you can't unfuck someone, especially not with your dick. One of the few words of wisdom that she dropped. Julian Assange is learning the meaning of the word karma. Ciao.